Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I'm Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom or Tom. How's it going?
Oh, Tony, we're doing a third listener question show, and I'm just looking through the questions. We have four questions for this show, and we are like covering the gamut. We are spanning the wide world of sports here, from Ohio State football history to the Michigan scandal to the college football playoff setup, and what could happen to the college football playoff setup moving forward. And man, it is our listeners have they done brought it, Tony. They have brought some good stuff here. Let's start with this one from at Vango_0. Did the collective national media's downplaying of the Michigan Harbaugh cheating scandals directly lead to the Sharon Moore scandal?
I think this is a very interesting question. And we've talked about this a little bit on a previous show, where back during Tatgate, there were so many rocks and stones overturned by various outlets and investigative reporters and even the dispatch and local news. And it I would be very surprised if, say, this was happening back then, if that didn't get uncovered by the wave of investigations going on from the media, let alone the university. So I do blame the national media a little bit. I know it's like it's did it lead to it? Um, no, the cheating led to the cheating. I mean, that's the media holds no part in that, because sounds like this has been going on for a while, but I think at some point you feel like you can get away with just about anything, even as you're being investigated, and still, like, only so many of the bodies are being exposed. And then they did have an investigation over their relationship. And in the summer, and both of them said, no, there's no relationship. So then apparently that was the end of it. But this is a person, and speaking of the Sharon Moore's mistress, I don't even want to the name, but she had a pizza named after her at the Brown Jug in Ann Arbor, where that's also where other coaches or some football staff members have items named after them. And it's just amazing that there would be a pizza, a food item at a restaurant named after the head coach's mistress. And that is also something that would be, you talk with, in terms of the investigation, like, how did this come to be? Who decided this? Whose idea was this? Who put it on the menu? Like, that's just one of the hundreds of things that would have been addressed if this was Columbus 13 or 15 years ago, where you're dealing with all of these different scandals, because there were so many different tangents when Ohio State was being investigated. Most of them led to nothing. Some of them led to some things. But these are just a bunch of little things that I think could add up to something big. But I'm not going to blame the media for this. But I will say that they probably, for all of the people who said, well, we heard about it, we knew there was something there, they certainly didn't expose it the way maybe other places would have done. But of course, if you have two consenting adults saying nothing's happening, even though they're seen together quite a bit, then I guess what are you supposed to do?
Yes, as you're talking, I'm looking up everything on the menu is basically named after a Michigan athletic person of some kind. Uh, Columbus Columbus folks will enjoy. Zach Wierenski has a dessert named after him on the menu there. So yeah, that's a fascinating, and I had not heard that before. That's funny. And as far as like the question, like I look at this and I think the question is this was, as you said, like the according to the story that's out there, this all started before the Stallions thing became public. So this was not like, well, he looked at that and went, well, I can get away with it, and so then did it. It was, the order of operations is backwards there. I think it's more that there were a lot of corners cut, right around the time Jim Harbaugh was at Big Ten Media Days saying, going to beat Ohio State or die trying. A lot of corners started getting cut, and all this stuff happened after that. And, we can run through the laundry list of stuff. And this is not to say that, this one adult's actions are directly a responsibility of this other, the person who's the head coach. Like, it's not what we're saying, but there were a lot of things that were probably a little bit overlooked or a little bit like, it's fine. Like I don't think that the enforcement level within the building internally was probably what it probably could have been. And I think a lot of that has to do with stuff kind of got, it all lines up very well with beat Ohio State or die trying. So, I don't know that, if you had people, we talked on a show earlier this week about Pablo Torre digging in, like if you knew Pablo Torre was coming to dig in on you 3 years ago, yeah, you'd probably be a little bit more on your P's and Q's than you were otherwise when, listen, the head coach sure didn't know what was going on anywhere. He had no idea what was happening with any of this stuff. And, if what's a Moida, like if what's a Moida is basically your program identity, then you're going to have this kind of stuff happen. It's not that it's that person's fault. It's just that you're sort of creating the climate for this type of thing to happen. So next one, from @ChipRoush, the teams with buys didn't do too well last year. How do you see it playing out this year?
Well, the reason it didn't go well for the team with buys last year is because they were all underdogs, except for Georgia. They had a bye, and they were like a 1.5 favorite over Notre Dame. So even Georgia, being the lone favorite in there, basically group of 5, Boise State, they had the bye. They got to play Penn State. They were underdogs there. Oregon, the number 1 seed, gets the bye, and they were underdogs against Ohio State. Arizona State, the other conference champ, they got the bye. They were underdogs against Texas. So it would help if you are not the underdog. And then looking at this year's quarterfinals, basically the only underdog at this point would be Texas Tech by about 1.5 over
Oregon.
Not over Oregon, but you know what I'm saying. Like Oregon would be 1.5 favorite over Texas A&M. Other than that, Indiana would be favored over both Alabama and Oklahoma. Georgia, of course, favored over Tulane or Ole Miss. Ohio State favored over Miami and Texas A&M. So it'll go much better on paper, just because again, you're not the rules last year have changed in terms of the conference champions getting buys, so that should take care of itself in terms of the part of the benefit of earning that buy.
Yeah, the higher seeds last year were not actually the higher seeds. The format of the playoff is such that you're going to get some weird stuff like this year, James Madison getting in and Notre Dame getting left out, even though Notre Dame would probably be a 3+ touchdown favorite over James Madison. So their format of the field is going to create some weirdness like that. Last year, a lot of that weirdness was created around the first round where, because Ohio State got pushed down a couple spots because of the, obviously Ohio State was going to be a higher ranked team than Boise State or who was it? Clemson? No, Arizona State. Like Ohio State was ahead of both of those teams, but ended up seated below those teams because they were going to get bumped up to be one of the top 4. You end up with a weird field, and you also end up with Ohio State then playing Oregon in Oregon's first game, as opposed to Oregon playing Arizona State or someone like that in their first game. And Oregon probably beats Arizona State, but Oregon extremely did not beat Ohio State because Ohio State was probably the most talented team in the field last year. So they've rectified some of those issues. Ohio State, last year Ohio State would have been the 5 seed with the current, the way the thing is laid out. And you would have had Tulane as the 4 seed. So, now Ohio State's a 2 and Tulane's the 11. So it's that in and of itself is probably going to fix a lot of those issues.
Yeah.
Next one from @ChipRoush. How badly must Alabama get beaten for there to be a real change in the CFP process? Well, so Y'all can't hold this against no Tide because they lost to another SEC team, Paul. That ain't no nothing. Everybody would have lost to that SEC team. Oklahoma, they ain't the SEC. They real good. That's not nothing. I don't think that's going to change. Like if you had Alabama going out and playing Oregon, like Alabama would just get firebombed by Oregon, just absolutely lit on fire and sent down the river. And but they're not. They're going to play Oklahoma, so that will just be proof that Oklahoma was a good and deserving team, and yada 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 yada. Now you can look at the statistical profiles. I did a morning show, a series of morning shows earlier in the week, and then also we actually talked about this on one of our earlier question shows, where it's like, which team would Ohio State most, least want to play in the playoff or presents the biggest challenge? Outside of the two group of 5 teams, Alabama is the easiest matchup for a team like Ohio State by 100,000 miles. Alabama would end up with about -6 yards of offense, and Ohio State would probably easily put up 20 to 30 points on them. And if you get shorter field, I mean, Ohio State would light Alabama on fire this year. And so Alabama is playing a team where Oklahoma's defense is going to be extraordinarily good. Their offense is terrible. So it's not going to look like a 31-3 kind of game, no matter how it comes out. But it's going to, Alabama is not a team that really is one of the best teams. Like Notre Dame would be a far more challenging matchup for Ohio State than Alabama. Like by a million miles would be a more challenging matchup for Ohio State. And Miami is as well. So I don't know that it's going to change the process. If you want the CFP selection process changed, you have to, that's going to have to be the other conferences coming in. And that's not going to be based on the final score of the Alabama game. That's going to be the other conferences coming in and saying, look, this is stupid that Alabama got in over Notre Dame. This is stupid that Alabama, that you've got these teams getting in and it's just based on the helmet. I don't know that the result of the Alabama game is going to be what changes that process, though.
Yeah, and I was thinking for a while that it's the result of Notre Dame not getting in that could change things, but my understanding, and I've read this, so this is not just my understanding of it. The next iteration of the playoffs, whatever they are, right now, it's Notre Dame. If they're ranked in the top 12, they're in, and so they were ranked 11th in the final ranking, so they would have gotten in. James Madison gets knocked out. So the idea of you've got a Notre Dame team that potentially is good enough to win a national championship does not make it in. That's enough to create a reason to change this and move it to 16 and create more avenues to make it in there. But with Notre Dame getting their sweetheart deal, which is what they've always gotten, and somehow it just wasn't enough this time around, and they were eliminated because there's only so much bending backwards you can do for a program. Eventually, you're folded in half. There's nowhere else you can go. But if they're automatically in, if they're ranked in the top 12, regardless of what happens anywhere else, then maybe they're okay. But I kind of feel like it's going to 16 next year. And I know they've been kicking it down, but the fact that they hit their deadline and they're like, well, let's move the deadline. And you've seen some unhappiness with 2 group of 5s getting in and the way things have gone. I'm expecting, wouldn't be shocked if there's a 16 team and maybe even they throw in a limit of 1 group of 5 team in there just as a little knife in the side. But I think if you go to 16, let the group of 5s in. It doesn't matter. I'd be surprised at this point if it's 12 again next year.
Yeah, I think that the stomping of the feet from everyone involved is just going to lead to, well, then we'll just let more people in and it's just going to get bigger. I mean, you've seen this with the NCAA tournament, and it felt like every year it was Seth Greenberg at Virginia Tech just absolutely sobbing at the fact that his team was once again the 66th best team in the country and was getting left out on Selection Sunday. And Dick Vitale is, oh, it's terrible, baby. It's so bad. Oh, how can you do this to these kids? And it was like, yeah, but they're like sub 500 in conference. Oh, it doesn't matter, baby. And leave it to the people in charge of college sports to screw it up by expanding things too much. So yes, this is going to be a 16-team thing next year, 100%. And that's just, you kind of have to make your peace with that. I'm much more interested. I think it's a much more interesting question whether you have the automatic bid thing that the Big Ten proposed, because that, from a competitive perspective, I sort of recoil at that in horror a little bit. But also the committee, I never feel like the committee does a great job. So if you can take it out of the committee's hands, I don't mind that really. And it also potentially sets you up for a much more interesting championship game weekend where you can have functionally like play-in games for all these conferences to get in. That could be, make really, really exciting competitive games. So, I have sort of grudgingly come around to the fact that I think that that's what they probably should do, even though I just absolutely hate the fact that it's, you're getting auto bids per conference, but, it also feels like the people in charge of the sport and the people in charge of selecting who she needs to get in and the people who get all weepy on ESPN about how, can you believe that they might leave, an Alabama team that just lost by 30 points out? It'd be the biggest tragedy in the history of the world. Like, if you can get some of those people out of the process, that would probably be a good thing. So, I'm interested to see whether that ends up coming around this year, because that, 16 feels like sadly inevitable. I kind of feel like at this point, 12 is not bad. 12 is really not bad. But if it's 16, I will grudgingly sign on for that if you have the, sort of auto bid thing. And also, if you can get the first 2 rounds on campus sites, like that would be really fantastic to get a couple home games for these, the higher ranked teams.
Well, I think you would just get the first round at home, but you'd also have the play-in games at home as well. So those be some extra games there. So I do expect that. We'll see again about the auto bids and the play-in games, but I do expect 16 next year.
All right. And the last one from @GoSpucklers. What Buckeye from last year's team would you put on this year's team to best guarantee a national title? That is a good one. I like that one a lot.
I don't know that you need to go anywhere defensively, but what would Jordan Hancock look like on this year's defense? I mean, it would just be like, well, there's even more lockdown. Like, what are you going to do with a Jordan Hancock? He can do all of these different things. But there are 2 names for me, Tom, because it's really interesting to imagine Emeka Egbuka in this offense in the slot with Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate. Because we never got to see what the Emeka, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Marvin Harrison situation. And this with Emeka Egbuka in the slot would be, I think, incredible. That to me is also a luxury. The bigger need is go ahead and just give me Donovan Jackson and I'll fit him in at whether he's a left guard at his home and then Luke Montgomery's at right guard. But to me, that is the correct answer. The fun video game answer is no, it's Emeka Egbuka, and you go from there. And I bet some people would say Will Howard.
Yeah, I don't think Will Howard's the answer, but you remember a couple of days ago when we were doing the thing and it was, the Ohio State path to the playoff, and you got really annoyed that you didn't have anything to add because I gave the completely correct answer. Yeah, it's Donovan Jackson, and you saw, you move your offensive line accordingly. But the fun answer is Emeka Egbuka, because scoreboard go burr. That's the scoreboard go burr answer, which would be like, that's fine. You figure out the blocking if you have Emeka Egbuka in the slot on this offense. But it's interesting that you can go through and it's like, the Jordan Hancock answer, like, yeah, that's a good answer. You could put one of the defensive ends in the mix in terms of, really any of the guys on the defensive line you could put in, they had lots of real good productive players on the defensive line last year that would be like, oh yeah, it'd be nice to have that guy back. But yeah, I think you nailed it. I think it's Donovan Jackson, and then Emeka Egbuka is the fun one if the correct answer is already taken.
It's amazing that you can look at all these defensive guys from last year and be like, well, what about Lathan Rich? I don't really need him. What about Denzel Burke? No. What about JT Tumala? No, I think Caden Curry's fine. Don't you want Tyreek Williams? Like, well, okay. Maybe
Yeah.
Tyleik Williams.
Yeah.
Maybe that would be the one. But overall, yeah, you look at that offense and Donovan Jackson certainly makes the most sense. Or if you want to throw Josh Simmons in there at left tackle and move Austin Sierraveld to right guard, do that as well. I think that's another one. But so anything else, Tom? Any other names that you'd like to throw out there?
No, there's a lot of positions that I'm thinking through. I'm like, nope, same guy. Nope, same guy. Nope. No, normally this is a fun one because it's like players through history and it's like everyone's racing to say Orlando Pace or whatever. But this is like, half the team is the same. So there's not as many, and they were less experienced last year. So there's not as many choices here.
Like Cody Simon shows up at the front door of the WAC and be like, can I come back? And like, no. It's like, you're sending Cody Simon away? It's like, we don't have room for him. No, you just got to go, son. You got to go. We'll call security. Like, but that's Cody Simon. That's Cody Simon. And you're like calling security on him because you don't want him around. I guess that's just a testament to this year's defense and the rudeness of the people at the WAC. So there you go, Tom. That will do it for today. If you want to hit the thumbs up, we'd appreciate that if you're watching on YouTube. Of course, all the other ratings and reviews that you could give us, couldn't possibly thank you enough for all of those things. If you are subscribing to some shows, go ahead. If you've not yet subscribed to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast, do that. Tom's Buckeyes tomorrow morning, do that. Mark Givler's Skull Session Recruiting Podcast, do that. Kevin Noon's Big Me Kickoff. Check out Buckeye Huddle Primetime with Juck. That's Monday and Wednesdays, twice a week. You can find that in your podcast platform as well. And of course, you can continue to find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. So thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you all later.